Well, hello and welcome to the Scottish Daily Mail Sports Weekend Review with Heather Dewar and John McGarry, where we look back at some of the biggest weekend sporting action, dissect Monday's back page, and also reflect on some of the biggest stories across Scottish sport. So, John, great to speak to you today. You were in the thick of the action yesterday. You were at the Hearts Celtic game. First of all, let's kick off with that and take a look at the back page because it's today's lead.
Yeah, it was a game that really lived up to its billing. I think we all thought there would be drama. It maybe wasn't the greatest game for the purists, but in terms of talking points, controversy, it kind of had it all. Obviously the main one, which is our splash today, is Martin O'Neill, who's clearly very critical of the decision to send off Austin Trusty with in the latter stages of the game, which clearly had a big bearing on the outcome. Celtic were leading 2-1 at that point. Hearts were kind of coming back at them, but Trusty's dismissal basically made it a game of kind of attack against defence, and Hearts ultimately got the equaliser, which ensures that they remain 6 points ahead of Celtic. So it felt like a really big day in the title race. And O'Neill clearly wasn't having the decision and how it was arrived at. I think that was the thing. Um, and I actually have a lot of sympathy for him in this case, because if you look back at the incident, the referee, Stephen McLean, makes his initial decision to award a yellow card against Trusty. He's got a good view of it. So there's then a VAR intervention by John Beaton, and Steve McLean goes across to the monitor. I'm not sure what Stephen McLean sees any differently on the monitor that he didn't see in real time. I'm not quite sure why he changed his mind. And personally speaking, I don't think it is a red card. It is a subjective matter, but I think the Hearts player Kabori is moving away from goal, and I think Liam Scales is covering. Hearts are clearly going to say there is a red card, but I thought O'Neill was justified in his comments.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's pretty much what Martin O'Neill said post-match. But so boiling point is the lead on the back page. O'Neill left furious after VAR official intervenes in trustee dismissal. I mean, there's been a lot on social media about this red card ever since. But from your perspective, when you were watching it, I mean, to you, it was clearly not an obvious red card.
No, I didn't think so. I mean, you do see instances of it where a player's going straight through and there's no covering defender, and there's really no case for defence. In that case, I thought it was very debatable, and I think the fact that the referee made his initial decision quite quickly, the whole thing about VAR, we're told, is it's got to be a clear and obvious error. Now, if it's a subjective matter, and I think this is, then I'm not sure you can say that is necessarily an error. So I'm not sure why John Beaton feels the need to kind of jump in. Steve McLean is well within his rights to go to the monitor and to say that he's standing by his decision. But that really happens. It seems almost as soon as they're called to the monitor, everyone's expecting the decision to be overturned and upgraded. And in this case, that's exactly what happened. No, listen, Hearts had the red card not been given, Hearts would have been jumping up and down about it. There's no doubt about that. But I just felt in balance. The player's first touch was taking him away from goal, and he was still a long way from goal. I wasn't convinced he was going to get a shot away. So I thought McLean's initial decision was correct. So I can understand why Celtic were upset by it.
Do you think that this will go any further? Do you think that they will try and chase this up? I mean, as you say, from a Hearts point of view, I mean, they'll be obviously delighted with that. But from a Celtic point of view, it was something that for them, they'll have seen change the game.
Yeah, I mean, I would fully expect Celtic will contact the SFA and look for an explanation. I personally always find these things a complete waste of time. The explanation is that the VAR official thought it was a red card, intimated this to the referee, who looked at the monitor and changed his mind. That is the explanation. There is no other aspect to it. It's not going to get Celtic anywhere. They could theoretically appeal it. Whether or not they do that remains to be seen. The fact of the matter is that in the wider scheme of things, even though Celtic were twice ahead in the game and were pegged back, it wasn't a disastrous outcome for them. It was a game that they couldn't afford to lose. They couldn't go 9 points behind Hearts, and Neil said that before the game. They would have far preferred to have won it, but given they played for 60 minutes in Bologna on Thursday with 10 men after Hattati was sent off, they were always going to be up against it physically, and Hearts were always going to have a real go at them in the second half. I think if you'd given Martin O'Neill a draw before the game, he would probably have taken it. He would have been disappointed that they didn't see the game out at 2-1, and he was obviously disappointed that the red card changing things. But I don't think it was a disastrous outcome for Celtic in the sense that they're still in the title race, and had it gone to 9 points, I think they were probably out of it.
In terms of where we stand now then in the title race, I mean, how pivotal was this match? Was it pivotal at all? I mean, going into it, there was a lot of chat about how important it would be for both sides, but is this Hearts yet again staking a claim, showing their worth, showing that they are the dogged fighters no matter who comes at them? Does it show anything in Celtic, the fact that they're still able to perform with 10 men, not get beaten?
Well, you know what, Heather? The real winners of this game were playing 50 miles away at Ibrox. You know, Rangers would have been hoping for a draw in this match. Something was always going to give. They take care of business against Dundee, and they then close the gap to Hearts to 4 points and move 2 points ahead of Celtic. In terms of what we know, what we learned about Hearts and Celtic, well, Hearts still haven't lost at home this season. The only two games they've lost have come away from home. Their spirit is fantastic. You know, they had injury problems yesterday with Tammy Devlin and Lawrence Shanklin being out, and that's a situation they're going to have to deal with for the next sort of six to 8 weeks. But they managed to kind of shuffle the pack, bring a couple of new players in, and Celtic still couldn't beat them. So, listen, Hearts would have known that they could have dealt a series blow to Celtic had they won the game, but they still kept them at arm's length. And as Derek McInnes said after the match, they're still really pleased where they are. The games are now beginning to sit down, and they're still 4 points clear at the top of the table. They no longer have the Scottish Cup to worry about. They never had Europe to worry about. Every game for them is a cup final. You know, they're in a very good place, albeit they are missing a couple of key players in what's going to be a key period, and that might yet prove telling. Celtic's point of view, we didn't learn anything new in the sense that this squad isn't going to win the league. As it stands, it's not going to win the league. It's not good enough. It's the longest unbeaten run this season, 4 or 5 games, I think. They would need to win pretty much every game between now and the end of the season. A lot's going to change in the next week. They have got plenty of money in the bank. They have got the capacity to sign 3 or 4 players that can turn the squad into a title-winning one. But as things stand, that squad's not winning the league.
Well, that's interesting. Well, we'll touch on Gary Keown's column in a little bit because he does reflect actually on Celtic and their buying power at the moment. It'll be interesting to see. We don't have long now till the transfer window slams to a close, so we'll see what happens on that front. But you mentioned whether they're going to win the league or not. Well, a team that's come quietly up through the ranks, if we want to put it that way, are Rangers. Also on the back page today, Roll has top of the table in his sights. So after Rangers beat Dundee 3-0, you obviously weren't at the match, but yet again, it's a real sign of intention from Rangers they just seem to have come completely under the radar and seem to be rattling on that door pretty heavily for top spot.
Yeah, it's almost like there's been 2 seasons in one at Rangers. You know, I mean, the early part where they didn't win any of their opening 5 games, there was this noise around the place, this anger against Russell Martin, this dismay that the new owners hadn't really delivered the way they said they would. A lot of supporters had kind of given up on the title early on. I never thought that was the case because it was still very early. What was significant is they recognised their mistakes. and they have made serious moves to atone for them by getting rid of Russell Martin and by employing Danny Role and by getting rid of Kevin Thelwell, the sporting director who was responsible for the woeful summer recruitment. And since then, Role has steadily improved them. He's not tried to do anything spectacular. He's not tried to ask players to do anything they're not capable of. And because of that, they've begun to win football matches. And with that comes, and they begin to improve a little bit. And they've signed a couple of players, and they begin to win football games a little bit more convincingly now. And have now won eight consecutive matches. So they're the form team in the country. They're only 4 points behind Hearts. And I'd make them not the clear favourites to win the title, but I'd make them the favourites to win the title at this point in time because I think there's still room for improvement.
Think that line is followed by many observers at the moment. I've heard it a lot in a lot of football discussions over the last couple of days, but it's really interesting because he came in. People didn't really know too much about him as a manager. I think from some ends there was a bit of dissent as well, because I thought, not another manager. We don't particularly know. They had such a torrid time under Russell Martin, but he seems to know exactly what he wants without being too shouty, without being too over the top. It seems to be a bit of a quiet confidence. Maybe that suits.
Yeah, he also knows what's required of him. I mean, from the outset, he didn't talk about projects or, things that were going to happen, in the distant future. He knew he had to win football matches in the here and now. And if it wasn't necessarily that pretty to start off with, then fine. So he has done that. And I think he's now given himself a platform and he's got the trust of the players and supporters. And he's also got the trust of the owners because he signed Chukwuani and Dre Skov Olsen. So he's got their backing in this window as well. He'll be looking to sign a striker as well before the transfer window closes in a week's time. So the mood around Rangers has just shifted and it's gone from one of anger and frustration to one of optimism. And that's come through winning football games, making the right in-game changes, recognising certain players were up to it and not playing them, and not persevering with players and systems that evidently weren't working. There's an element of pragmatism to Danny Role, which I've been impressed with, and I think it has kind of caught the eye of a lot of people. Got a long way to go, and they're on a good run at the moment, Rangers. Inevitably, they will have a blip at some point, but significantly, next week when they play away to Porto, that's the last European game. They're out of Europe already. They just have to fulfil that fixture. They will have to kind of give it their best shot because they need coefficient points to an outside chance of direct entry into Champions League. So they can't just give up in that game. However, once that's out of the way, it does clear up midweeks. Celtic have the possibility to beat Utrecht on Thursday, that they'll have at least two more European games. Now, with that comes travel, comes the obvious physical exertions of playing the Thursday night and then attempting to get up for a game on a Sunday. We saw the effect of that yesterday. That's another thing that will be in Rangers' favour as this title race gathers pace.
Yeah, and also you mentioned the new signings, Andreas Skov Olsen and Chukwuani, both coming on for their debuts. So they've both had a shot at it. They both know to a minor degree. They haven't faced an Old Firm derby yet, but they know what it's like to play for Rangers in that kind of arena. You think that they're good additions to the squad?
Well, in the summer, when Rangers signed, a real kind of assortment of players, many of which were from the kind of English lower leagues. I must say, when I looked at it, I thought, I'm not convinced about this. A lot of these guys and how they kind of step up. You just never know until a signing actually has played half a dozen games. The thing about Scotland is it's a land of the 90-minute judgment. Everyone wants to either, get a player as the best thing since sliced bread or an absolute dud after one game. You just don't know. We've seen many good footballers come to this country and not succeed. Happened down the years because it's a very demanding environment. However, these guys have arrived with pedigree, and my inclination is they will be good signings. I mean, Scott Olsen's a very experienced Danish international. Chuck Wani, I saw him recently playing for Stumpgrats, and he looked a real, you know, talented midfielder, and I think they're both at good ages. They're both hungry. My hunch is that they will be good additions, and they will improve the Rangers squad, and they'll also, when you've got more competition for places, it tends to have a positive effect on those guys who are also trying to get into the team.
Yeah, well, we should wait with bated breath to see what happens on that front then. Let's move on now to On the Road. This is a weekly feature by Hugh MacDonald for Daily Mail Sport, and it's a terrific feature. Hugh basically goes around all sorts of different grounds across the country, from lower league to top flight, and now he's recently been to Europe as well. I don't always get to go to Europe, by the way. He's not that lucky, but he's written a brilliant one, which is in today's paper. I absolutely love this because I know Hugh very well, and I know that he loves his culture as much as anything else. He's very well read, but he's got a great kind of cultural aspect and cultural vibe to him, which does radiate because he loves his music and he loves his books and stuff like that as well. And this kind of encapsulates Hugh MacDonald as much as what he's writing about. So today's one is Football and Culture Collide at Malaga's La Rosaleda. It's a lovely piece. It's reflecting on the match between Malaga and Burgos, which Malaga won 3-0. But it's also about the history of Malaga, the club itself, and how it was formed and everything else around it, but also how important culture is to Spanish football.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to see Hugh getting a little bit of sunshine on his back. The last time I spoke to him and I was asking what game he was doing, he was saying that he was going so far down the pyramid, he thought he might bump into Tutankhamun. So anyway, he's over there. This actually resonated quite strongly with me, Hela, because I was in Malaga last year, and exactly 10 years ago, I'd also been there when they were in the top flight, and I was over doing a Celtic sort of midwinter training camp, and they happened to be playing Barcelona, and we managed to get tickets for the game. So we went to the game, and Messi was playing, and it was tremendous. Malaga at that point in time, sort of top six in Spain. They were going really well. And I went back last year, and I was thinking about going to a game again, and I was looking and thinking, my word, they're way down. They're in the second tier, having been in the third tier. So Hugh manages to explain how all that's happened, in terms of the ownership, and how they've fallen upon hard times. But what really comes through is the supporters that he meets. There's one of them, and he says he's talking about obviously the Champions League days and winning trophies and whatnot. And he basically says, you support a club not because of what it's won, but it's because of what it is. And that's it. That's why these guys are there. The club's going through hard times, but it's on the way back up again. But it's a big part of who they are as people, and that is what comes through in this. And whether Hugh's writing about a game in Spain, a game down in the sixth tier of Scottish football, he manages to kind of convey the sense of what football means to people, what a big part it plays in their lives. Whether you're getting a crowd of 30,000 or 300, it's an enormous part of people's lives, and the cultural significance of football is vast.
Yeah, and one thing that's kind of really gripped me, I think, when I've been reading Hugh's features, over recent months, is exactly that. It's getting really down to the real bones of football and what it means to the community that it was formed in. And having covered a lot of lower league games in my time, that's really struck me. You can go to as many top flight matches as you like, but it's very formulaic in the main. As a journalist, you go there, you're not going to have much rapport with supporters if you're just going up to the press room or your press box area. You go in, you do your job, and you go away. You don't really get much access to much else. Whereas, I specifically remember going to East Fife for a game years ago, and and it was a really cold, miserable day outside, and I was sort of traipsing around, looking awful with my ridiculously massive coat on and all my radio kit. And the people there could not have been nicer. They're like, come in, have some soup. And you go in, and I sat in the lovely little kind of cafe area afterwards. They gave me warm soup, they gave me a hot coffee, and basically I sat there writing up my article and got chatting to everyone around me. And it is that thing where it's if it's the heart and soul of the community, just like Hugh's piece here with Malaga and how much they put it into it. It doesn't matter what division or what league you go to, you will always follow your club. I found that myself on so many lower league clubs that I visited and reported from, and that to me is real football. You know, it's the real thing. It's because you get to speak to the people around you, and Hugh's on the road articles just do it so well. And he even managed this time around to get Burns Night into and a Scottish influence into his chat about Spanish football as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing that comes through them. I mean, obviously, I'm more accustomed to covering teams that are, looking to win, big titles in big cups, and obviously at a certain level, these clubs are aspiring to do the same thing. But the supporters are going along because it's part of the weekly ritual more, and they want their team to win as much as a supporter of Celtic, Rangers, or Aberdeen. But it sense the community around these clubs. One thing comes through is a number of volunteers, that from people who are tying up the goal nets to people working in the kitchen, and it's what a huge part of communities these clubs play, and what a focus it gives people as well. Um, it's it's easy to lose sight of the fact that out with the kind of the top 3 or 4 leagues in Scotland, there's a huge number of football clubs that exist away from the limelight, but the kind of the work they do in terms of giving people a focus and just a sense of purpose as well. And obviously, they're all they're all hoping the team succeeds, but it's massively significant. I mean, I'm not a million miles away from Mary Hill, who are down in I think they're about the 7th tier at the moment. And the occasional Saturday I get off, I'll pop along there and take in a game, and it's just so refreshing. From the kind of Premier League stuff, when you can, you're just sort of, you're in the grassroots of the game, aren't you? And apart from the fact it's an awful lot more reasonable than going to Premier League football. That's another reason to embrace it as well. But you see what it means to people, and and it's a struggle for these clubs to exist, but they get by because they're filled with good people who give of their time and their energies to kind of keep them going. And it's a massive part of the Scottish game. It's something that maybe doesn't attract the same headlines of the kind of bigger clubs, but it's a huge part of the fabric of our national sport. And it's great that the Scottish Daily Mail gives it its due place, I feel.
Yeah, I agree completely, and it really does show that football is for everyone. So, great job to Hugh this weekend. Well, before we wrap up, I think it's incumbent upon us that we have a look back at Gary Keown's regular column. So he does a column every Sunday. Sometimes it's a bit controversial. A lot of the time it's quite controversial. This one focused mainly on Celtic. In a breakfast season of uncertainty and mayhem, one thing is for sure, shambolic Celtic deserve to end up empty-handed. I'm sure for a lot of Celtic fans reading that straight off the bat, wouldn't be too happy with that.
Well, I think some of them would. I think any of them would struggle to take issue with it. I mean, there's an old kind of adage in life about if you fail to prepare, then you prepare to fail. And that's exactly what Celtic have done this season. You back a year ago, they let their star striker in Diogo Furuhashi leave without a replacement. You go to the summer, they let Adam Eder leave without a replacement, an adequate replacement. Throughout the whole thing, they have signed largely players who are downgrades on what they've left. There has been a complete information vacuum as Brendan Rodgers has left, as Wilfred Nancy has left. There's a real lack of leadership at the club. Nobody really knows what the kind of grand plan is. So supporters feel isolated, disenfranchised, frustrated. In terms of on field matters, though, I think Celtic, as things stand, have got exactly the season they deserve, and I think Gary's bang on the money. That's not to say they can't turn it around. They have got a week, £77 million sitting in the banks. They have got the means to do something about it. They're going to have to sign at least three good players. To inject the necessary quality into that team. If they do that, they have still got a decent shot at winning this title. If they don't do it, then I think they'll come up short, and I think that nobody concerned will be able to arrive at any other view other than the fact that the blame for the matter lies solely with the hierarchy. So yeah, I agree with absolutely every word that Gary wrote.
Yeah, I mean, he did touch upon most of the things that you've just mentioned there. But one of the things I thought was quite interesting, and it kind of ties in, going back to the very start of today's discussion, ties in with potentially Rangers, and if you look down south to the English top flight, potentially with Man United as well. Gary says these players, so Celtic players, ought to have a look at themselves too. Some look like they downed tools under Nancy, obviously Wilfried Nancy. Most gave the impression they weren't listening to him. Whatever the reality, they have to take responsibility for being rolled over by St Mirren in a cup final. And I guess you do have to ask the question, much as though a lot of people will think the board are at fault, a lot of people will think Nancy was at fault prior to O'Neill coming in. But what about the players? We don't often put a lot of the onus here on the players, but actually look at Rangers, for instance, under Danny Rule, and how they've managed to work so effectively with him, and now they're seeing the results they wanted. Look at Manchester United, absolutely capitulating at times under Amorim, and now 2 games under Michael Carrick, and they've won 2 massive matches. Is it all down to the manager? We've now got O'Neill in at Celtic. How much responsibility do the players have? And actually, how important is a manager? Is it all down to the system? Do the managers have such a massive impact on a team that actually players who simply are, ill-equipped to adjust quickly to system changes will never get the results? What are your thoughts on that?
I think what's happened at Celtic this season, it kind of underscores the point that if you get the right football manager in the door, pretty much everything else takes care of itself. And we're seeing that to a certain extent in Man United under Carrick. If you get the right guy in the door who's got the kind of the human touch and is playing a system that suits players, so much else falls into place. Players are comfortable and results then tend to follow. I think the problem with Nancy was simply that he came in mid-season and was determined to play a 3-4-3 that they were completely unsuited to. And nobody in the hierarchy, at any point in the interview process, if there was an interview process, said, "Are you sure about this?" or raised a red flag. And it was insane to actually try to implement that without a pre-season, without the right players to do it as well. It was just ludicrous. You know what? You can maybe point the finger at certain players. I don't think the Celtic players did down tools under Nancy. I think they were just bewildered. They were being asked to do things they weren't capable of. They didn't understand a lot of the instructions. I don't think that you could say they were lacking professionalism. I just think that inevitably, when a group of players is being asked to do something which they feel doesn't suit their skill set, I think they no longer play off instinct. You can see their body language isn't great. Yeah, you know what? Maybe they'll perform. You're always expected to do your absolute utmost in any circumstance. And, I think perhaps towards the end of Nancy's time, you could maybe question if their minds had gone. But I think it's a kind of cause and effect thing. I think if you get a manager in who's so completely ill-suited to the task at hand and the players, then it's going to unravel. It is easy to kind of to point the finger at the players, but nobody's pointing the finger at the players under Martin O'Neill when he came in first time around. So why change it? There was no need to bring in this radically different approach. So I think it all goes back to the decision-making process, and the players by and large they were outstanding yesterday, but you can see they're more in tune with what's been asked of them.
Well, I guess it does show the importance of a good manager after all, then, and probably why they all get paid the big bucks. Well, Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us this week. We're going to bring you another edition next Monday. What's up next for you in the coming days then? Obviously, big game for Celtic. Anything else in the week ahead you should point our listeners to?
Yeah, we'll be looking back in tomorrow's paper at the big game at Tynecastle yesterday. There's some interesting news to come out of that in terms of a player who maybe might be moving on, who will be, we believe, staying at Celtic. Moving on the week, Celtic home to Utrecht on Thursday night. The situation is now clear as day. They win that game, they go through to the next round of the Europa League. So that's a big night. That would be a commendable achievement if they were to get there. Albeit, I think some Celtic fans might think that it's a bit of a double-edged sword, given how tight the league is. So yeah, that's the next game on the horizon, and then we're into the weekend where Hibs play Rangers. So yeah, there's no let up at the moment, and then the transfer window closes around this time next week. So I'd expect there'll be plenty happening on that front as well. So yeah, never a dull moment, Heather.
A dull moment indeed. Look forward to all the action in the week ahead. Then thanks very much once again for listening. If you want to read our stuff online, you can check out at Daily Mail Sport. Look out for John's stuff in the days to come online on Mail Plus. And we'll bring you plenty more sporting action next week. Bye bye.